Hello, Hannah-natics and Saxonists. My name is Hannah Saxon, and I welcome everyone back to the channel. Today, I'm rocking the mysterious sci-fi look because we are doing another... Today, Miss Azure and I will review albums we get at retail price from stores, at cheaper prices from Goodwill, online at any price, or anywhere. And I will still review the albums you request if I do not have a physical copy of that said album. So with that being said, after last episode where I slogged through Madonna's alleged worst album, I'm going to need some comfort food for my ears. Let's see, which album is on my plate today? Star Trek! Just so you know, I am a Trekkie. Not a Trekkie that loves every episode or shoves every factor error in the show down people's throats, but I'm a Trekkie. For years I loved the original series and the original series of movies, The Next Generation, and a bit of Voyager. My favorite characters are Spock, Scotty, Uhura, Captain Picard, Data, Geordi, Captain Janeway, Tuvok, 7 of 9, and EMH. I know that's a lot of characters to love the heck out of, but I digress. One of the things that stuck with me most about Star Trek was the score. So for this episode, we are mainly going to talk about the instrumental parts that stood out to me. There aren't any lyrics to work with on this album, so I'll be getting my band geek glasses on. I already have glasses, what do I do in my life? For those new to band terminology, this is your chance to click off the video. And for those who aren't, prepare for me to use a lot of words that my clarinet instructor taught me. So, after all that stalling and introduction, getting rid of all nostalgia, all bias, all Trekkiness, does the soundtrack for Star Trek, from the originals to Voyager, does it hold up? Let's find out. Starting with Track 1, the original series theme. When first hearing this album, I was half expecting William Shatner to narrate that iconic intro, and I wasn't very surprised that he didn't, because that's a standard for Star Trek albums. No narration in the studio versions of intro themes is fine by me, but back to what I was saying about the actual song. In this track, we hear the first instance of the Enterprise fanfare that persists in the entire first half of this album. It's only in the first half because the original series and Next Generation both have the Starship Enterprise, but the later series, being Deep Space Nine and Voyager, they don't have it, in case you didn't know that. But I'm not here to give a Trekkie history lesson. I'm here to talk about the score. We hear a few repetitions of that aforementioned fanfare on horns and trumpets. Then there's a minor build-up to the soprano singer vocalizing the main melody of the song and therefore the series. This song is a staple of sci-fi, and the only disappointing thing, besides the lack of Shatner, is that the album doesn't have the extended version, just the televised version. It's not much, but it retains the original series' late 60s charm, especially that high note. On that triumphant note, Azure gives it a 3.5 out of 5. Tracks 2 through 4 are a suite from one of my favorite original series episodes, The Trouble with Tribbles. I love that episode because of the plot, the Tribbles, the comedy, the fight scene, and the focus on my favorite underrated character, Mr. Scott, or Scotty. But the soundtrack for this episode is not a very strong point. I mean, at the beginning of the suite, there's a cute little xylophone and flute opening led by a snare. It's kind of upbeat and adorable until the muted trumpets blast their way in. I suppose they're there to add a sense of tension. I don't get it, but that might be because I haven't seen the episode in years. Other than those minor annoyances. There's also some clarinet solos. I play the clarinet, by the way, and congrats, Star Trek, you represented my instrument well. After that, there's a droning synth and a childish pizzicato. The recurring muted trumpets come in at the worst times, and it gets pretty obnoxious after a while. Also, there's a part that sounds like my CD is skipping. I swear, it isn't. One chime glissando later, then comes an urgent sting, leading to a marching band-like melody accompanied with a peppy percussion line. More muted trumpets to close it off, and before you know it, the track's over and we move on to track 3, part 2 of the suite. Azure gives track 2, Bartender Bit to Dead Heap, a 3 out of 5. Track 3, 2/3 of the way to the Tribbles suite, the Muzak Maker / the Scherzo Maker. It begins with a beautiful clarinet solo, and that's all well and good, but after that bit of awesome comes some hectic woodwinds and a wood block as the backing percussion. I don't think I need to explain why this incredibly short track isn't very good, now do I? Azure gives Scherzo Maker a 2.5 out of 5. Track 4, the last part of the Tribbles suite, and it is the best part. Why is it the best part? Because the section of the episode it plays in is focused on Scotty. Starts with a trumpet fanfare, not the trumpet fanfare, and then there's an oboe solo playing the melody. It's pleasant, but the major shift within the glockenspiel is even more pleasant. The motif from the second track reappears, which is kind of a letdown, but the guitar and trilling piano sections make up for that. I mean, seriously, Scotty was right in saying there will be no tribble at all before that trill section plays. There's no tribble at all until the second section. Besides the fact that this part of the suite technically comes before the previous section of the episode, it kind of, well, Captain irks me. This part, entitled Big Fight, spelled F-I-T-E, what? Really sets the vibe of a bar fight with the opening of a trumpet sting and a snare drum roll leading into the part where Scotty delivers the first punch. Then all hell breaks loose, musically and scenically. The fast clarinet mixes well with the equally fast glockenspiel. In fact, this track's main gimmick is that it's pretty damn fast. Fast clarinet melody, fast trumpet tonguing, fast mallets, fast timpani, the works. Also, the song gives me extreme West Side Story energy. There's a xylophone scale to close it out, and we are done with the first suite on the album. That's right, there's more than one suite on this album. Azure gives A Matter of Pride to Big Fight a 3.5 out of 5. Track 5, The Next Generation title theme. Aside from the lack of Patrick Stewart narrating, which I already mentioned with Shatner in the first track, the lead into this song is exceptional. There's some ambience, another instance of the Enterprise fanfare on a trombone and solo trumpet. Then we get to the phenomenal melody. The theme that was recycled from Star Trek the Motion Picture. But all of you Trekkies know that. The trumpets play the A melody, and the French horns in the background provide the B melody, with the harp glissando lead-in. At the end, there's some heavily sharp accented trumpets, and before you know it, the theme is over. I wish it went on for longer, though. Azure gives Next Generation's title theme a 4.5 out of 5. Tracks 6 and 7. Another suite. But this time it's from the episode Heart of Glory. An episode that I've actually never seen. Yeah, and I call myself a Trekkie. Track 6 is the longest song on the album, clocking in at 8.5 minutes. But that's not a problem. The suite starts with a violin ostinato, which, if you don't know, is a repeated musical phrase. with some clicky percussion accompanying it. Track 6 is the longest song on the album, clocking in at 8.5 minutes. But that's not a problem. The suite starts with a violin ostinato, which, if you don't know, is a repeated musical phrase, with some clicky percussion accompanying it. There's a lot of ominous instruments, including some oboes and euphonium. Then we get to the recurring two-note motif, also recycled from the motion picture, to reintroduce the Klingons back into the franchise. We then get some jarring accents on low brass and piano, an octave jump on mallets transitioning from a timpani buildup, and French horns providing beautiful harmonies. Some fluttering flutes, ambient synthesizer, brushing percussion, and graceful trumpets later, there's a part I can only describe as sneaky. We get to hear a rare instance of the Enterprise fanfare being played in a minor key on a vibraphone, and the strings mix well with the brass. Also, there's some synth that sounds like pizzicato on a string instrument, and some timpani playing to instigate a fight, I think. Again, I haven't seen the episode. Azure gives it a 3.5 out of 5. Track 7. The clarinet opens the song with the aforementioned recurring two-note motif and an oboe playing it shortly after. The later woodwind melody, it kind of clashes, but other than that small nitpick, it sounds very ominous with a minor resolution. Speaking of resolutions, the two notes finally get resolved too. And then we get some tribal percussion. Now the two-note motif becomes a four-note motif. And this is when I realized it was the Klingon battle motif from the motion picture. There's some clanging and some clicking, a calm synth playing the four notes and turns orchestral afterwards, and a giant tense crescendo to end the track. I'm doing a lot of describing the production, but that's the only thing I can do to review this album. There are no lyrics, so I'm working what I'm given. Azure gives track 7 a 4 out of 5. Now we get to track 8. The track that I bought this album solely for reviewing. The orchestral suite from one of my favorite Next Generation episodes, The Inner Light. What a heartwarming episode and an equally heartwarming song. It starts with a beautiful D chord and it leads into a flute with no backing until the second part. No backing instruments makes the flute solo even more poignant. It's a song I played on my recorder. It mixes well with the harp at the second part, and after that, the strings take over and make the track even more graceful. I think I'm gonna cry. The cymbal transitions into the B melody, played again on the flute, this time with some calm orchestral accompaniment. Then it transitions to a waltz-like melody, and it becomes absolutely blissful. Flutes, cellos, and harps join into the B melody, and after that we get a satisfying A melody to end it off. And I'd have to say, with absolutely no nostalgic bias whatsoever, this is one of the best tracks on this album. Azure gives the Inner Light Suite a first 5 out of 5. After we give my first full score ever on this show, we move on to track 9, the Deep Space Nine theme. It begins with a gong hit, the only one on the album, sadly. The horns play a different fanfare than before, and then we get into the main trumpet line! In the B melody, the horns and trombones harmonize pretty well with a steady snare backing it up. Then it all culminates into a reprise of the A melody and a very satisfying ending. It's not the best opening theme or the most memorable one, but it definitely stands out to me, even though I've never seen a single bit of DS9. Azure gives the Deep Space Nine title theme a 4.5 out of 5. Tracks 10 through 14. A suite from The Visitor. Another suite. This could only go one way, the good way. And now a bunch of short intervals, without clips. Rainy Night is the first part of the suite, and there's not much to say about it other than it's the shortest song on the album at 1 minute and 8 seconds. It's pretty relaxing in production though. 3 out of 5. Track 11 is a bit reminiscent of track 8, but not as memorable. The smooth woodwinds make the track until we get into a dark transition into a minor key. It's not a quite sticking track, but that's why I only said a few sentences about it. 3 out of 5. Track 12 is a bit more notable than tracks 10 and 11, but not by much. There's some dissonance, some high notes with either simple transitions to it or the notes being played by low brass, which aren't really made for high notes, but I digress. It kind of strikes me as a mediocre song, especially the outro. 3 out of 5. Track 13, shifting constantly from major to minor, the beginning flute is a bit heartwarming like track 8, and fortunately this track gets a little better from there. We have high notes on an oboe, a string line mixed with a harp line and scaling down decrescendo until we resolve on C major. 4 out of 5. Track 14, we get to the end of the Visitor Suite, finally. Aside from Rainy Night, this song has the least for me to say about it. There's a flute, there's a timpani flourish, there's a graceful oboe and triumphant fanfare horns. That's it. 3.5 out of 5. Finally, we get to the last main title here, but not quite the last track. Track 15, the Star Trek Voyager main theme. It is by far the best Star Trek theme I've ever heard, and it holds up pretty well. No bias, by the way. It begins with a muted trumpet, and unlike the Tribbles suite, it's not annoying! Also, you can tell which notes the timpani drums are playing. And then we get to the A melody. That melody kicks the song off the ground and into the final frontier. There's some low horns and some fluttering flutes playing it. Then when the B melody kicks in, we get sort of a harmonic or melodic major scale. I don't know which, please comment below if you know. And then we get back to the A melody, and then there's a giant cymbal crash and super high trumpets playing the last section, and it all culminates into a very, very satisfying ending. Azure gives the Voyager theme a 5 out of 5. Finally, the last few tracks of the album are another suite. It's from Heroes and Demons. Track 16 is first. It begins with a calm flute, bit of a recurring thing now, which transitions to a call in response to an oboe playing. There are some soft parts played on horns and trumpets, some cymbal crashes, a beautiful major and minor shift, and we close the song off with a decrescendo. Azure gives it a 3 out of 5. Track 17. Sharp accented trumpets and snares begin the song, and then it's followed by a marching melody with regal sounding horns. It legit sounds like I'm in a throne room. One more high note, and before we know it, we end. Sad, I know, I wish it went longer too. Azure gives it a 4 out of 5. Track 18, the penultimate track. It's called Armageddon. Jeez, that's a pretty tough name to recall. We start with some chiming until we get into a low oboe melody. It sounds strangely hopeful, but then we get into an unsettling crescendo with a tense timpani. I assume this will introduce a villain? Possibly a twist villain? I'm not holding my breath. After some fast trumpet triplets, again, before we know it, this song ends. Azure gives Armageddon a 4 out of 5. And now we finally get to the last track. Track 19. Where's Freya / To the Rescue. To start, there are some calm horns and wind chimes constantly doing glissandos. The low brass and mid strings come in next, and again, like this rest of this album, they mix very well. Then we get some more regal brass, like in track 17, accompanied by a marching snare. The strings then play some long whole notes with quarter notes from other instruments and a slow harp. After a satisfying trumpet solo, the final fanfare begins. There's a cacophony of brass and strings, which happens 3 times in the whole song, and a harp wavering between two notes. After the third cacophony, triumphant trumpets come in and the horns completely steal the B melody away from the trumpets. And in my opinion, not only is this a good way to end the CD, but it's a good way to end the 30th anniversary of Star Trek. Azure gives it a 4.5 out of 5. Verdict! Overall, this album is pretty good for a soundtrack album. I'd say my favorite songs here are the Voyager theme, the Next Generation theme, and of course, the Inner Light Suite. My least favorite has to be Maker, aka Track 3. As much as I love the original series, the soundtrack for it, despite its late 60s charm, doesn't really hold up. The series that holds up is definitely the Next Generation. I definitely put the album in my great tier. Thank you guys so much for watching my latest album review video. I'll be coming out with more videos soon. And until next time, Azure says goodbye. Like and subscribe, hit the bell to stay updated, check out Naya Edom, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and remember, when opportunity comes knocking 4 times, you know what to do. Take care. Bye! Tracks do through 4. Chime glissando later. Oh my god, it cut off at the beginning. I don't say blah blah blah. Fast clarinet melody, fast trumpet tonguing, fast mellets. I definitely put the album in my great tier. Yay, Trekkies.